Okay, I'd like to call our special meeting to order. Roll call, Michelle, please.
Charles?
Here.
Glenn?
Present.
Larson?
Here.
Miller? Sanchez? Here. Winkleman?
Here.
Wong?
Here.
Just missing Miller.
Okay, she should be joining us shortly. All right, could I have an approval of the agenda? There's only one item on the agenda, the para incentive options for 2019 to 20 budget. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. And since we only have one item on, and because we're in this room and we're televising the budget meetings, I think people assume there was public comment time. We don't typically do this at special meetings, but I will allow there was only one person that signed up, so Michelle, that'll be fine. If they would like to speak now. Thank you.
I have Sherry Hamel.
I'm Sherry Hamill, and I live at 2425 South Swain Drive in Beloit. And good evening. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of some of us paraeducators, and I would like to start with the obvious that we're no longer the den mothers who started out years ago. We have a book of roles and responsibilities, not to mention diapering, tube feeding, diastat, and CPR training for the medically fragile. I got to thinking and started a chart that invited other paraeducators with to make anonymous remarks on it. And I was able to reach out and get responses from 74 paraeducators, most of which work special ed, and about half have been in the district less than 10 years. The other half of the responders have worked in the district between 11 and 35 years. Did you know 10 of us have some college credits? 25 have their associates, with 12 of them having additional credits beyond that. 6 have their bachelor's degrees, and 2 of them have postgraduate credits. 1 person has their master's degree, and 9 people have other types of degrees, which 2 specified were in early childhood. A total of 51 of the 74 responders have some sort of higher education. I just wanted you to know some of our qualifications you may not be aware of while discussing our raises. Lastly, after starting this, I did have others who have worked for the district over 10 years express how unfair it was that new hires got paid around $2 on average less than they do due to the pay freezes they went through years ago. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me tonight.
Thank you for being here.
And I don't know if you guys have,
What are those, please?
they're the professional wage increase proposals that was sent out in March.
Oh,
My
paraprofessional. Oh, okay. Thank you. Go ahead. You can hand them to everyone. Thanks very much.
These were proposed in March 26th from Dr.
At the business meeting. Okay, so back in March 26th of 2019, we were brought a recommendation to increase the paraeducator hourly rate. And at the time, it was far away from when we adopted the budget. So we weren't opposed to it, but we asked, could we get more information? And it was supposed to come back to us in April with more information, but it did not come back to us. And so we did bring it up at a previous meeting and requested more information, which we got in an email a few weeks back from HR. And I also included that to all of you. Resent it to all of you, and it's also included on our packets tonight. So that's how we got where we are right now. And there were 3 suggestions. One was CPI only, one was $14 an hour, and one is $15 an hour. I wasn't able to get the comparables for other districts, but I did go on Wecan and I looked at what other districts are paying. And we are definitely the lowest. The highest I found was 17, and it seemed to be the averages was in the 14 an hour range. I think it's possible that some districts pay more when it's special ed paraeducators. Jeff?
I believe we had the discussion, it was probably in March, was it? When I was on the board at that time, there seemed to be a unanimous support to move the paraeducators up the pay scale. And then I got off the board, so where it went, obviously nowhere. So there was 2 proposals, if I remember right. One was to do 14 the first year, 15 the second year, and the other proposal was to do a flat 15. It's not in the budget, it's my understanding, for this year. I'm not a big believer in taking money out of the budget, the fund balance. However, we are at 19%. I do believe that as we move forward with Amazon coming into the community, the possibility of the casino, that $15 an hour will be probably what's a market rate, if even on the low end, and we're on the low end now. So I would be in support of using fund balance this year. I would do the flat $15. I thought I would never say that in my life. I'm serious on that. If you know me, you know I'm very tight in the money. But the paraeducators are a big part of our schools. We're trying to improve upon that. And I think we need to show that support back. So I would make a motion at this time to use the fund balance for this year to pay for the $15 per hour, with the idea that we have to find a way to put it in the budget in the future years.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this? Mr. Wong, do you? There you go.
I guess the dollar amount that was proposed, does that include benefits? That's the first question.
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let me think of something else.
Oh, Mr. Winkleman.
So a question, maybe some questions to think this through, right? So I hear what Jeff is saying, and I am extremely reluctant to put us in a negative funding perspective by using fund balance. That's not sustainable. It means in future years we have to continue to do that. So you don't pay your regular bills out of your bank account, and on a regular yearly basis. So for me, this motion would need to also include that we would commit to an equivalent cut or a cut in the budget or at least the ability to accommodate this amount in the budget next year, so that something has to go to make this balance if we did fund balance this year, because continuing to use fund balance is a mistake, and it will just continue to go down, and we will not have any, and then how will we pay for this expenditure? So I think there'd have to be some kind of a commitment that says we would need to find, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that Jeff, you said $15 an hour? Is that what you said? Yes. So we'd need to find $406,000 somewhere in the budget
And to
to
clarify,
make this work.
this would be reimbursed at our approximate 80%.
Yeah, but we still have
So-
to come up with it,
We do, but some of it would be coming to us, 80%
a
of
little
it.
bit of it.
Mr. Larson?
My concern is that, yes, if we say we're going to take fund balance this year to pay for it, and then next year we have to build it into the budget. But look what happened in our short time this year. Our budget changed almost overnight because, fortunately, we had 300 more students than we expected to have. And that decreased our funding by $1 million from the state. So, you know, the optimist in me says that next year we're going to have even more students, which will then affect that declining student enrollment aid, which then is going to put a tighter pinch on the budget. So if we can find room for it in the budget this year, and we had to scramble to cut $750,000 for a balanced budget, it's good intention to say, yes, we'll do it this year to fund balance, but next year, we have no idea what's going to happen with the budget, and then to put this expectation on next year's budget, I think is a little bit unrealistic, and it worrisome to me.
A question was asked about the dollar amount and the hourly wage, and we asked if it was including benefits. Can someone just clarify that for me, please? Was the dollar amount the actual wage including?
You sent the email to us.
No, I'm asking what, someone just asked a question, I just wanted a clarification.
I'm not sure. Yeah, the amount here includes benefits. Okay, so I would like to say something to what you said, Kyle, because I've been thinking about this too all weekend, and you're right, because of that hold harmless thing, we actually, by getting more students, lost some more money. I would like to ask Ms. Armstrong, if we get more students into our district next year, do we lose more or do we start gaining at that point?
Well, you're still receiving, 1.1 million in declining enrollment fees, so if you start going up again, you're going to continue to lose that exemption.
Okay, at what point does it help us that we're getting students?
Well, when you will not get that exemption, it will move over to your base revenue aid, which is not the same equivalent of what you're getting for declining enrollment.
Okay,
You start seeing that shift, but it's not a one-for-one dollar.
okay, but what I also wanted to say was that when we found out that we were getting that less money, 1.5, no, wasn't it 750,000?
That's what the net effect was.
Okay, so the net effect was 750,000 when you added in our plus and took away our minus. So we found a way to cover for that. From my understanding, is a lot of it had to do with shuffling things to grant-funded areas. And I'm thinking if we have a grant writer in our district, this is what's 20% of 400,000? 80? How hard will it be to find $80,000? To give this increase and find the $80,000? I don't think it's going to be that hard if we have a good grant writer.
But then it's not just the 80,000, it's this dollar amount plus 80,000 more.
Right.
If you have to replace this amount, or like Mr. Klett said, we are above, we're at 19% right now, and it would be great to replace it, but our fund balance does, we do increase it at times. It might not be next year, it could be the year after that.
Mr. Armstrong, do the benefits increase as the salary increases?
Mr. Winkler.
So, Pam, in a one-shot deal, what you're saying is probably correct, but everything will continue to increase, right? So this is going on their base. This is not a beyond base piece of the puzzle. This goes on the base, so which means benefits increase, base increases. Next year, benefits increase, base increases. Next year, benefit, same thing, right? State aid doesn't do anything for us in that same way. All we get back is what we get back. So we're still growing the hole bigger as we go. That is the dilemma, and that's why a corresponding cut somewhere needs to show up that says it puts us back at least in the ballgame so that we're not negatively drawing from fund balance. So if there's a commitment to do that, then I think the decision is a little bit easier right now. Or it's a base-only question.
Mr. Klett?
My original proposal, John added more to it than was in there, but my recommendation was that we find a way to put in the budget next year, and that means a commitment to a cut, which is what John is saying.
Correct.
That's basically what I was saying, is this cannot be an ongoing situation. There has to be a commitment from this board. Having said that, when do we ever know what our budget's going to be? Never.
We never do.
We never know what our budget's going to be. And so we're always looking for what's the best, where should we put our funds? I'm just saying, from my perspective, the paraeducators are an important piece of us moving this district forward. I think it's worth the commitment with the board saying we are going to do what John said. There's a commitment that we have to find that money in the budget next year. It's not going to come out of fund balance. But I think to not recognize the wages in this community where it's going to go, we're fooling ourselves. And do we want to lose our paraeducators to Amazon or to the casino for this amount of money? And to me, the answer is no. And as I said before, I don't spend money easily. I look at this as an investment into our school district, into our people, which is our most important resource. But the commitment has to be there to this board that this is not going to be an ongoing fund balance thing.
Right. Ms. Miller?
I just want to build on what Mr. Klett was saying. So we're already seeing in like the childcare industry, we're losing like early childhood providers who have gone to school and invested in classes to go into that field and eventually leave for other fields because of exactly what Mr. Klett is saying, like there's competitive pay elsewhere. And I think it's a worthwhile investment in just the infrastructure of our schools. We're going to be doing a lot of really awesome stuff, to bring up that achievement. And I mean, that's a key piece, or the people like right there in the weeds with our kids. So I agree that it's a complicated issue, but ultimately I have to lean toward we have to support our people.
Anyone else? Mr. Wong?
I would also agree that with what John had mentioned about that was what I was thinking of before. We can't rely on the fund balance, because my concern is what happens if something else comes up this year, whereby now suddenly we have a hole of, I don't know, $500,000 or $1 million where we have to tap into fund balance. And that's it could be a slippery slope that we're going to fall into. If we're going to propose this, it has to come from, obviously there has to be some cuts down the road, and it has to be mandatory. This is not an ongoing payment out of the fund balance. Otherwise, and then that begs the question of going back to if we have increased enrollment, the dollars that we do lose from that whole harmless fund balance that we receive on an annual basis. So I don't know. I guess I agree with we need to support the paraeducators, and obviously with competing factors out there. But if we do commit to this board has to be committed to making sure that the cuts are made for the budget in the following years. This is not a fund balance free-for-all.
Thank you. And I really was impressed that we could get this notice that we have to find $750,000 and quick, and it happened. So I think that we can be more creative next year to make up for this. And I think that these people that are here this evening are in the trenches. They are diapering kids. They are feeding kids through feeding tubes. They are with our special needs kids, They're really in the trenches. These are the people we are trusting with our children in this district. And I mean, babysitters make more. So I'm convinced that we are on the right track by moving forward with an increase. Mr. Winkleman?
So I would argue that it was not easy to balance that 750. Remember, we were very fortunate in that a TIF closed and added money back into it. TIFs aren't going to close again on a regular basis, right? In fact, who knows when the next TIF will close. And so that helped, right? That helped get us to where we need to be. And that was $1 million something.
That was before we found out about this 750.
That was part of this whole deal.
Was it?
Yes.
It was in the preliminary budget.
In the preliminary, yeah, but the other day, when you found out about the 750, the TIF didn't help with that. No, that's, yeah, it was already figured in.
So while I am highly supportive of the Paris and have been for a long time, I think we need to think about a balance. So I'll ask this question a different way. If we said we were committed to taking $400,000 out of textbooks, are we equally committed still to this same motion? Because we have to take it somewhere. And there's only a few pots that are big enough to take it that way, right? Either that or we lose people, because that's the other piece of this puzzle. So just to put it on an even perspective, I'm not saying I'm not. I mean, I'm thinking maybe that is worth it to do that for this year, right? To balance the budget, take it out of that, delay the textbook purchases until next fiscal year and see where everything comes out. We'll still have fund balance sitting there to potentially use. But then at least we know we're going in with something balanced and accommodating the need that we need to do. So it's a different approach, but it deals with it more straight up and more out in front. And I know there's been times when we have delayed textbook purchases into a fiscal year in order to balance budget. That really ties our budget hands very tightly because there is no wiggle room after that. But maybe that's just a different approach to think about that and do it more on an upfront basis so everybody knows where we're at.
Anyone else? Mr. Wong?
I was going to actually say it was, are we willing to cut positions if need be as well? And that's even a harder task. I think that we need to, the goal of this administration, and I know Dr. Monroe has made this very clear, is to grow this into a 5-star district. And that's the goal and objective. And I know some people might feel that it's a far-fetched proposition, but I've seen the determination in him and his team and what they've dedicated up to this point. So, as we do, the hope is that we have more people coming to our district versus leaving. And when we get to that point, yes, obviously there's going to be a lot more windfalls that we're going to have. But I think it's our responsibility to be fiscally responsible, but we also have to be realistic as well and say what happens if things don't progress in that manner. So I think that, I'd really hate to have jobs cut, especially educators, or if you have to increase class sizes and things like that. Like I said, we might look in and say it's only 400,000, but it's still a hole that we're potentially going to dig here. And I like I said, if we can find the cuts in the budget, then okay. But I like John's analogy about the textbooks as well. I guess my final thoughts.
Mr. Ranklin?
One more, just because I've heard it a couple times, hope. We have hope that we're going to have more. We have hope, right? Hope is not a strategy. Hope is a wish. And a wonderful wish it might be, but it's not a strategy. So for me, I would rather see an actual, something tied to this that says, we're gonna back this out of the budget for now, and so we can get balance to be able to do it. If we can put it back in at some point, or need to put it back in, the board will have the option to draw from fund balance, as Mr. Klett says, to do whatever for a one-time purchase or a purchase as necessary. This makes this, if you did that, it would make this be the functional part of the budget, to live there in perpetuity as it will anyway. So I guess I would offer that as a suggestion.
Mr. Klett?
This is more for Joanne. If we do what John is suggesting, which is reasonable to me, can we still do the balanced budget tonight with the idea that we would come back, revisit the budget on this issue to see if there's a place we can find it, and if we can't, fall back on the fund balance with the idea we cut next year? Is that feasible to do that?
You can adopt a budget today that is balanced, and then you can come back to this and the board can approve budget revisions later in the year that would then offset the negative budget, or if you can have those cuts somewhere else. You can do by a 2/3 vote of the board, amend your budget mid-year.
Oh, But to clarify, you said we can do it, I'm sorry, Jeff, let me clarify what you said. To clarify, you said that we can adopt a balanced budget. I think Mr. Klett might have been asking if we adopt a unbalanced budget, saying that we will go into the fund balance for this if we don't, within the next few weeks, find a place to cut. Is that right,
No.
Jeff?
No,
Can
what
you
I'm
explain
saying
it again?
is, we balance the budget as presented, at least that's my anticipation. What I'm saying is, what Mr. Winkleman is saying is, push this down the road a little bit, see if there's areas we can cut to pay for, and I hear Mr. Wong, I think, saying the same thing, and I think, Kyle, your concern is the same thing. If there's a way to do it next week or the week after, before the next board meeting, and if we can find that, use that dollars versus the fund balance, we can always revert back to the fund balance if we feel that's the way to go. But I'm not opposed to looking at different ways to doing it. I think John's idea is a good one. And I think it's fiscally responsible to the citizens of Beloit to say we are going to go back and revisit it. But I do think it's important that we do the balanced budget tonight, which is why I asked Joanne the question. Can we do the balanced budget tonight and then revisit, is there areas that we can cut or revisit to say this is how we're going to pay for it so it doesn't come out of the fund balance? Because then it's set in the budget.
Mr. Wallner.
So Jeff, are you proposing as well to take the current funds out of fund balance then to cover it and then?
No, what I'm saying is, put the motion down the road to the next board meeting. Investigate the budget as it is passed. Is there a way to amend it going forward to find funds within that budget? And then if we can't, have that discussion again on the fund balance. That's what I'm suggesting. I think it's the responsible thing to do. But I do think the paraeducators deserve a commitment from us.
Mr. Winkleman?
Jeff, maybe just a little bit different, and Joanne, you tell me if this is not feasible. So if we said yes to the 15 at this piece of the puzzle for Paris, we know that we now need $406,565.77, if I'm reading that correctly. When we get to balancing the budget in the next meeting, we could say that we will reallocate $406,565.77 and remove that from pick a place. And then in the meetings down the road, the incentive is to come back to that place, be it textbooks, be it something else big, and see where that goes, right? I mean, it could be textbooks. Sean's sitting there thinking, please don't say me, but I know that that's another big place that we could then come back to and say, okay, do we find a way to cut throughout the budget, or do we absolutely have to reallocate from fund balance at a meeting down the road? But then we're balanced tonight. There's a commitment to Paris, but the board is on the hook to come back and make it happen because it's important, because there'll be a big hole in somebody's budget somewhere down the road.
So are you offering an amendment then, basically, to we're going to do this, but we are going to, in the next meeting, make the cut? Is that what you're saying?
I can either offer an amendment, or we can vote down Mr. Kletz's proposal.
I would offer an amendment, it's simpler.
Then that'll be my amendment.
Okay, is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
All right, so any discussion on the amendment?
Can I need to know, how you want the amendment worded for voting?
Okay, so would you please word it, John?
Yeah, so the amendment would the amendment is to follow the proposed increase to $15 per hour, total $565.77, okay? And with the commitment that we will then remove that much from the regular budget in the following meeting to stay balanced, and have a commitment that in a future meeting, fairly soon future meeting, the board will decide where that comes from, or choose to use fund balance for one fiscal year.
Okay, is there any discussion
You set,
on the amendment?
Okay, with that amendment, what will have to transpire for the budget adoption is I will have to pick a spot tonight different budget than maybe what you've intended. So I want you to just have that caution in mind.
What do you think, Mr. Weitzman? In other words, we would do
understand
it
what she's
later,
saying.
so, the same thing, but a little bit later.
I can live with, I would rather present a balanced budget tonight and know that the board will come back and make an adjustment. We make adjustments when grants come in, we make adjustments. It's not an unusual piece to make an adjustment. So if that was a rarity at this board, then that would be different, I think. But I don't think it's unreasonable to do that. It's not like this conversation hasn't been public, people don't know. We certainly can acknowledge it in the budget actual meeting that comes forward, so people will know that that we are pulling from one spot with the intention to come back with a possible budget revision.
So it's just to make the budget balanced right now?
Correct.
And then we come back and work on it, that's what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Any more discussion? Mr. Wall?
No, you voted on it.
So we're approving it, or we're saying it will be approved upon the revisions?
We're doing it now, and at the next meeting, we will remove one or several items and then say, okay, now we're going to come back to visit these at the next board meeting and say, how are we going to fund these?
We're basically adding into this, to the budget. If we said yes to this, Joanne, I think, we're adding into the budget that's sitting on paper right now, $406,565.77. So if we vote yes to this, that's what we're doing.
So we're approving an unbalanced budget?
No.
No, because we're not approving a budget yet. All we're doing is approving an
We're saying we want this
expense.
to happen.
Okay.
At the next meeting, we work it out.
Well, I have to have if you're adding an expense, I have to have an offsetting revenue, or I have to cut 400 from a line item. Which is what I'm
When we get to the actual budget, correct.
Yeah.
So publish the budget.
Correct.
Adopted tomorrow. I have to cut 400 from,
Yep.
just for random example, from teaching and learning, put this in to just leave our revenues the same, our expenses the same,
Correct.
Right.
and knowing that there's a cut on the teaching and learning side that we will investigate if that's where it needs to stay. Is that?
You
That's what
pulled one thing out.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're trying to do.
Okay, Mr. Wong.
Joanne, on a dollar amount, what excess do we have in the fund balance?
In the fund balance,
Dollar amount, roughly.
It'll all come out of fund balance. And you put it back in. Mm-hmm.
roughly about $2 million. Very rough estimate, without me having different.
Okay, so the answer to Mr. Wong's question was there's about 2 million extra funds above what our policy calls for in the fund balance right now. All right, are there any other questions? Okay, so there's a amendment that we're going to be voting on right now. Michelle, can you read the amendment back to us, please?
This is what I have. Amend to increase to $15 per hour, the total dollar amount of $406,565.77 for paraeducator raises with a commitment to remove this amount in subsequent meetings in the near future to find reductions, and if necessary, use fund balance through budget revisions.
Okay, was there a second on that? Who seconded it? You did? Okay. All right, all in favor of the amendment? Is there any more discussion? Okay, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, the amendment passes unanimously. And now we vote on the motion, which is basically the same as we just read, so. All in favor of the original motion, which is to go with a $15 an hour for paraeducators, please say aye.
Aye.
So, I'm struggling just a hair because the original motion was to move a $15 increase for the paraprofessionals from fund balance for this year and $5
Oh, okay.
next year.
Okay, so the amendment took care of that. So now we're voting on the original as amended, I should have said that. And it's not a $15 an hour increase, it should also said to $15 an hour minimum. Okay, all right. All right, so it is as amended, shall we say. All right, let's vote again. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously, and we're ready to adjourn and go to our next meeting.
Move adjournment.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're adjourned. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, the budget hearing. Is there, we have a roll call first, please, Michelle. Roll call?
Present.
Here.
Still here?
Ready.
Here.
Okay. I'd like an approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
All right, are any questions on this agenda? This is pretty simple budget presentation tonight. Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we have the budget presentation. It's going to be given by Ms. Joanne Armstrong.
Oh, there. Sorry, I was going to have a little panic attack there. So the presentation that I'm going to go over tonight is just the presentation you got is the preliminary, but updated with the more current numbers after we got the aid certification and the enrollment numbers with the new average. So it should look very familiar to you. With the revenue limit, this is where we saw the change in the 3-year average. We had originally projected that 3-year average to be about 6,900, and we were very happy to see it go up 120 in that average, up to 7,020 kids. Of course, as we've already discussed, that has the adverse effect of that declining enrollment. But that gave us our revenue limit authority of $71,718,341. Okay. Just a little adjustment to put that up to 7,000 on our membership. Our aid actually increased even more. So that is where we lost 1.1 million. This is kind of that net effect we were talking about. We lost 1.1 million in the hold harmless exemption for declining enrollment, but we did see an increase of 297,000 in our general state aid. So that offsetting was the 758,000 that I was looking for through that budget that we have previously talked about finding those. So this, again, just kind of summarizes that calculation on how the equalization aid comes and what determines our equalization aid, and then therefore what we have as a revenue limit of what we can tax for. And this year it is the $3,418,000. This is a copy of the revenue limit worksheet. I know a couple of board members wanted to see this, so now that we have all the actual numbers from the state, I have included this in here. If you are curious of how it kind of flows through, it's kind of hard to, I want you guys to be able to hear me, so right here is where we're seeing that average of our current enrollment, which is taking our summer FTEs as well as our September FTEs. So you can see that we are still having declining enrollment, but not nearly at the level that we were expecting when we did our projections and what were first reported. So we actually were showing a September FTE count for revenue purposes. Now remember, there's lots of different membership counts and how you count them for what purpose, but for revenue purposes, it was our calculation with our aid, we've got our high poverty district, our state aid for computers, and our personal property credits. That brings that 71,000 down to 3,480,000 that we're actually able to levy. And then we break it down into the debt payments, the general levy, and the referendum debt. So that's just a very quick kind of, a lot of numbers on there. If you're like me, I'm a geek, I like the numbers, but some people it's very overwhelming. At the very bottom, I'm sorry, I wanted to point this out. Down here, very bottom is where you're seeing your levy rate. That's your bill rate that we're talking about. And again, we are keeping it steady at the $10.30 that we had already proposed in the preliminary. So it is the same levy that we had projected. We just did an adjustment on that defeasance that I'll talk about here in a few minutes. Okay, this is the exact screen that I had presented previously, except the levy is a little bit differently for 1920 because of those adjustments to aid that we talked about. Okay, our revenue sources, I've done the adjustments for the state aid that we'll be getting as far as, and our taxes due to the levy change. Got your visual still. Again, 79% of our funding's coming from state sources. That's huge in, your state aid is a massive part of our revenue at this point. Okay. This is our special ed. Did you notice 64% of our special ed is coming from our Fund 10 transfer, which means general fund is paying a very significant portion of your special ed funding. So as the state continues to look at special ed funding, we really need to be advocates to ask for that additional funding in special ed, because when $9 million of it is still coming straight out of our Fund 10 general levy, we need to get some more services in our special ed side and get the state to help subsidize that cost. Okay, these are our expenses. Of course, this is done prior to the motion that was made earlier for the paras. So as a side note, I was jotting down a bunch of numbers while we were talking. So on your Fund 10 expenses, and it's going to be split because some of your paras are on special ed, but just so you can understand the component here, we would present this still as balanced. I'm going to have to take it from somewhere else. So these numbers will be off slightly from where we're going to be putting those as I can find a place to cut it. Okay, this is just the visual side of where we're spending that money and what will happen with our fund balance. As long as we stay at a balanced budget and we find the $6,567, this will stay as it is. If we don't and we have to go into fund balance, of course, that fund balance at the end of the year 1920 will go down. Okay. Okay. This is our mill rate. I adjusted the levy amount. You'll see the mill rate is staying the same, which is resulting in a $1.43 difference per thousand on a house value for our taxpayer. Now this is a calculation that Baird has provided for us. This is about the defeasance that we were talking about. To maintain our levy, this would give us the ability to prepay some of that referendum debt, which is the Fruzen building that we've done years ago. And I'm going to step back over here, apologize if I talk loud. This side here is what it looks like before the defeasance. So you'll see all our principal payments, and then you see the interest payments. And the interest payments we would be making are going to $7.97 million, and this would be paid off in 2032. With the defeasance that we are proposing under the levy, this middle column is your savings. So we would continue to make the same principal payments It is our proposal to go ahead and take advantage of this defeasance, which is already built into your mill rate and the budget. Okay. Are there any questions on this? Okay. That is the presentation. I know you've seen it before, so yes.
Joanne, just a couple to clarify. So 1030 is the mill rate.
Yes.
Listening to the prior conversation from our previous meeting, we could anticipate the mill rate to go up or down next year.
Mm-hmm.
Safe, that's an easy
Yep.
one. We
Usually
could
goes to-
probably anticipate it to go up again if we kind of read the tea leaves as to how things shake out, because, you know, if we get more people, if we get a higher property value, which
Yep.
they've been going up, good for Beloit, but that also means the property people here pay more.
Yep.
So the 1030 could be more next year, and we should be upfront about that so that nobody's getting surprised that
Yep.
it, you know, the goal would be to keep it in that range, but it wouldn't be a surprise to see it go tick back up again. If you look at prior mill rates, you'll see that happening, right?
Yep.
The goal is to not bounce up and down like crazy, because
Right.
then nobody can predict their tax.
Right, and that's kind of the basis behind the defeasance as well, is to keep us more at a steady level and be able to take advantage of that tax savings, but also so that when those fluctuations happen, our ideal is we would like to maintain a mill rate around $10, somewhere in that vicinity, to keep that what a normal community member can always anticipate. We want to give them some regularity that they can expect in their mill rate.
Right.
Of course, it can go up and down. The defeasance is a one-year defeasance, so, you know, we can use that option if we had to in the future. If it was going to go down drastically, we can look at that. But no, the ideal rate is to keep it steady for the community. Yes.
So without the defeasements, the mill rate would have been significantly lower, right? I mean, like half of that? Is
Yes,
that
it was
correct?
going to be $5.20.
And the reason for the significant drop, is there anything in particular?
It would be the removal of the revenue limit. It would also be the increase significantly of the state aid, and it's your declining enrollment as well.
Removal of the revenue limit exemption.
Yep.
So is it fair to say that, I mean, are these one-time items or are these recurring?
No, those were one time. Your revenue limit energy exemption was a 1 year. And so you taxed it last year, so we levied for it. This year, you're getting the aid on that $5.8 million. Next year, it's gone completely. So it's not in your aid calc and it is not in your levy. So unless the state brings back that option, you would not have that any longer affecting your aid or your levy.
And I'm thinking you're probably ahead of us on this, but you've already built in a calculation going forward to take that into account?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We're working with Baird. Their new forecast model has come out, so we're starting to do projections for next year already.
Okay, all right.
So,
Maybe a couple
yes.
more.
Yep.
So savings in the debt service line saves us overall. Is that correct?
Yes.
So those dollars would then eventually free up to be used in other places.
On your Fund 39, which is your referendum debt, that would, if that goes away, you pay off all your referendum debt and you don't replace it with a different referendum debt.
Right.
Or the state doesn't change their formula with the Blue Ribbon Commission, yes, it would potentially, that goes away. You can't levy for that in Fund 10 because it is outside your limits.
But what it does do is give us the ability to potentially ask for change and not affect the mill rate,
Correct.
right? So the sooner we get out, the sooner we can ask for change
Yes.
and be able to say to the public, your mill rate will not change, but we will still be able to do these projects.
Yes.
Think about when we passed the huge referendum to put in the schools. That was high school debt went away, was the large chunk of it. And so we were able to come back to the public and say, it's hardly going to affect your mill rate because we've already paid it down and paid it off. So this defeasance is significant more than just affecting this budget, it affects a future plan down the road that says we'll be quicker to be able to ask again if we want to ask, if we need to ask,
Yep.
to be able to do something,
Yes.
right? I
Yes, and it also shows, in my opinion, the fiscal responsibility that you're looking at, saving, your community members 2.3 million in tax and interest
Correct.
that they would have to be paying for 2 additional years. At this point, you're taking that right off the gamut if you don't go forward with something.
And my other one would be, and I know we don't know an answer to this question yet because I keep watching for it. My goal over many, many years is that the school district levy is under the city levy. We have been there multiple times.
Yep.
I would love for us to be there again this year,
Yep.
but I don't know where they are going to be. So we can all just cross our fingers that 1030 will be just under the city so that they can lead the way in
Yes.
the levy world to be
Yeah.
able to do that. And then I have one last question about the cut piece that we're talking about, right? So I know I mentioned Dear Sean's budget, and in conversation you said that might be a little bit overused right now. Is
Yes.
that fair?
Yes.
Is it also reasonable for this board to think about the overages for facilities being a one-time thing out of fund balance use as the board considers how to deal with a shortfall, right? I mean, you could take
Yep.
it from wherever you need to take it right now, but that's a potential in my mind that says a facilities overreach, for whatever reason, is a great potential use for fund balance because it's a one-time cost.
Yes.
It's not a built-in every year, I got to pay the electric bill, right?
Yes.
It's a one-time thought. So, colleagues, I would ask you to think about that, and Joanne, I'm sure will lead you down that road. But that is a potential way to think about if you had to use fund balance, that would be a way to do it in a way that I think would not necessarily affect anybody who was looking at our bonds, our bonding rate, all those kinds of pieces of the puzzle that go into fund balance use. That makes sense because to be a little bit over on all the projects we've done, that's not unusual. So just the offering of a thought.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so where do we go now? Go ahead.
I have two thoughts. One is thank you to Joanne and your team for putting this all together, Dr. Monroe and your whole team, because it takes the whole team to make this come together and get in the spaces where we need to be the best educators of students. So, A, thank you for that, and I would move approval of this budget. You're looking at me like I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I'm confused because of the last meeting. I thought, what did we decide to do about?
Oh, well, sorry. The last meeting is on record already. Move approval of this budget minus the 406.
Okay, so the change will
Yes.
be made.
So if we want to formalize it, I would formalize it into that proposal.
So,
That's what I was asking when I said, where
Yes,
do we go
that's fine.
now? Yeah.
Yep. So it will
So-
remain balanced.
yes, okay, so the motion in number 4, which is establishing the levy and adopting the budget, as far as those levy amounts, those would all stay consistent because those are what you're setting
Right.
there. We have the understanding that with this budget you are adopting has a transfer of expense from a line, I would just say a line item in the Fund 10 budget of 406,000, I think it was 577. Okay,
565,
yep, sorry.
77.
That's, okay. To transfer that into a salary and benefit line item from another source in the budget. But that would keep all your numbers as far as expense and revenue balanced within this budget.
Correct.
But this levy motion in number 4 is accurate as stands.
Correct.
And to clarify, is that what you
It
mean?
is. Well, that's what I seconded. Exactly.
Okay. Are we ready for a motion? Oh, the seconded? Okay, I'm sorry.
John has a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Wong.
Just so we're all clear on this, that there will be the adjustment in the budget for the 406,565.77.
Yep.
Or the funds will be taken out of fund balance. Was that
It's up to the board to come back and either do
at
that
a later time?
or make a budget adjustment that says fund balance will pay for X.
Yeah, my understanding from your first meeting,
we
your
said.
motion was to adjust the current budget to be balanced, which means moving it from one line item to another line item and presenting it as is. At a later meeting, you will make a determination if you're going to put that back in or a portion back in to use at a fund balance with a budget adjustment.
Thank you.
Okay. Michelle, would you please read back the motion?
Is that clarification of the fund balance part of the motion?
That's why I was asking you to read it back.
Which is most helpful, yes? I think it's probably more helpful to say yes to be part of the motion.
Okay, so then the motion would read that the Board of Education approves the 2020, 21.
No, 1920.
Budget and total tax levy of $16,533,494, which consists of an operating tax levy of $2,388,167, non-referendum debt levy of $1,030,300.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, $1,030,327. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Referendum debt levy of $12,765,000, and community services levy of $350,000, including a transfer of expense in the amount of $406,565.77 to salary and benefits from another line item in the budget, or the funds will be taken from fund balance at a later meeting.
Okay. That was a mouthful.
It kind of was.
All right.
Can you read it again, please? I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
So that was the motion. Jeff, you seconded it? Okay. So we have the motion and the second. Did everyone hear it? Is everyone clear on it? Okay. Any more discussion or questions? Mr. Wong.
One last comment for the record, and I think that it's been said before, but I want to make sure that the paper's getting this clear. The savings per 100,000 is $143 this year. But I think that the one thing that I really, and I think it's great with the defeasement, and Joanne, thank you so much for all the work you put in and your explanation last week and helping me to understand all of this and the video and all of that stuff. But the $2.4 million cannot be, I mean, that's a huge sum of money that we're saving. And it's over an extended period of time, but it does open up the door, as I think John had mentioned before, for future referendums when that time comes, that we do not have to add additional levy on when we need to go back, and whether it's adding on buildings or whatever infrastructure we're working with at that time. So I think it's extremely important that the public knows that, because you know, we are trying to do our best, and I appreciate you bringing that forth to the board.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
And that's it.
Mr. Larson.
And if you're in the community and you're like me, the $10.30, just to be clear, includes the normal taxes plus the Fund 80 plus the referendum debt. So all of this is yours for the low, low price of $10.30 per $100,000.
Yes.
Mr. Winkleman.
I think the only other thing to follow John's lead on piece of the puzzle, the savings by the defeasement is a direct savings to taxpayers. And they may not feel it in the same way that we feel it, but it is a direct savings to the taxpayers of Beloit. And that doesn't happen very often, that a school board is able to do that.
Okay. So as a direct savings, the taxpayers will not be levied that amount because we were paying it off earlier, okay? And to make that clear, and also to make it doubly clear, what Mr. Larson said, we did the Fund 80, the Community Service Fund, and still have a lower mill rate than we did last year.
Yes.
Okay.
You are seeing the Fund 80 in there, and you are seeing the defeasement of, you know, that will save you $2.3 million. So both of those included in that low-cost reduction of your mill rate.
Okay. Can I ask you a kind of a general question here? The property values are increasing in Beloit.
Yes.
But does that necessarily mean the mill rate goes up, or the mill rate could it actually go down because of the increase in values? Because you get so much per hundred, you pay so much per 100,000, so I mean,
When you're looking at your equalized property value, it will affect your levy. So as those property levels continue to go up as an equalized value, it's not just, when you're looking at the equalized, it's not just what's here in the city, it's in all of our taxing districts.
Right.
As that goes up, your mill rate typically will go up with it.
okay, do we end up getting less from the state because our property values?
Yes.
Is that an immediate thing, or is it gradual?
It would, your property values are not going to take you out of the, economic situation that Beloit is in at this point, so it's not going to be overnight. But as these gradually increase, you will see the increase in property values. You're going to see that difference in your calc,
Okay,
so.
all right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we are ready to vote. A roll call vote, please, Michelle.
Charles?
Aye.
Platt?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Sanchez? Aye. Larson?
Aye.
Long?
Aye.
Engelmann?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So the budget is approved unanimously, or adopted unanimously?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and help with all of our questions over the past several weeks. We appreciate it.
No problem, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There's a second. Okay. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.